Welcome to the Podkey Summary of Safari and Web Technologies Group Lab from WWDC 2026. A lot of this week's web conversation comes down to a surprisingly grounded idea. The flashy stuff is fun, but the fundamentals still do most of the heavy lifting. There's real momentum around native platform features, from better form controls to 3D models to extension APIs. And the bigger theme is that the web keeps getting more capable without asking developers to stack on quite so many hacks. At the same time, the people building these standards are making the case for patience, because speed is great, right up until it breaks accessibility, privacy, or somebody's browser. One of the clearest takeaways is that AI tools don't replace knowing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript well. They actually make that knowledge more valuable. If a code generator hands you a snippet, you still need to know whether it's solid, outdated, or quietly broken in a way that'll make next month miserable. That's why semantic HTML, modern CSS layout, and JavaScript basics were framed as career-long investments, not old-school prerequisites you sprint past on the way to the fun stuff. It's a pretty practical point. If you understand the standards, you can use AI as a speed boost. If you don't, you're basically taking code on faith, which is not a great development strategy. There was also a lot of enthusiasm for how many things that used to require jQuery, preprocessors, or custom glue are now just built into the platform. That matters because simpler code is usually easier to maintain, easier to debug, and less likely to hang around as a weird historical artifact nobody wants to touch. The advice here is to stay current on the latest HTML, CSS, and JavaScript standards, because the cleanest solution today may be much simpler than the one you learned a few years ago. And honestly, the web quietly retiring old hacks is one of its more charming habits. It's like finding out the drawer full of adapters can finally go away. Another thread running through all of this is accessibility, especially the reminder that proper semantic HTML gives you a lot for free. Use the right elements, and you automatically get things like screen reader support and keyboard behavior without bolting them on afterward. That came up in the discussion around customizable select, which is meant to let developers style form controls more freely while keeping the underlying select element and its native accessibility benefits. The practical guidance was simple. Keep textual option labels in place. Browsers that support the new customization can enhance it, and browsers that don't will fall back to the normal native list. That same text also helps assistive tech, so progressive enhancement and accessibility line up nicely here, instead of fighting each other for once. On the more futuristic side, Apple's new model element is a big signal that 3D content is becoming a more natural part of the web platform. It lets developers embed USD and other 3D assets across iOS, macOS, and visionOS, and there are JavaScript polyfills to extend support beyond Apple's platforms. There's also a promise-based loading API, which is useful because nobody wants a mystery blank rectangle while a model is still parsing. You can show a spinner or placeholder and react when the asset is actually ready. The size guidance was pretty sensible too. Try to keep models under about 10 megabytes, basically treating them with the same discipline you'd apply to image optimization. That's a nice reminder that shiny visuals still live in the real world of bandwidth, memory limits, and devices that are trying their best. Related to that is Spatial CSS, which is still in preview form, but sounds genuinely interesting. The idea is to take familiar positioning concepts like top, left, bottom, and right and extend them into depth, so developers can place and anchor multiple objects in 3D space using patterns they already understand from 2D layout. That could make spatial interfaces feel less like a separate universe and more like an extension of normal web development. Panelists also sounded excited about a few other upcoming standards, including the install element, declarative partial updates, and a CSS random function that can choose between keywords rather than only numbers. That last one may sound tiny, but it opens up some genuinely creative possibilities in pure CSS, which is usually where the most delightful nerd excitement lives. There was a solid update on browser extensions too. Apple has been working in the web extensions community group for about 5 years, pushing toward a more concrete spec that keeps APIs interoperable across Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. For developers, The practical upside is fewer browser-specific detours and an easier path to bringing existing extensions over to Safari. And notably, that porting process no longer requires Xcode or even a Mac, which lowers the barrier quite a bit. Apple is also supplying migration tools and documentation, so the message here is pretty direct. If you've already built an extension elsewhere, Safari wants to be less of a separate project. Safari's extension permission model still has a distinct personality, though, and that personality is very much privacy first. Site access isn't granted automatically. Users have to explicitly consent, which can be a little stricter for developers but fits the broader philosophy. If an extension doesn't need broad, ongoing access, developers can use active tab permission instead, which limits access to the current tab and drops it again when the user navigates away. It's one of those choices that may feel a bit annoying during implementation, but it's also pretty easy to understand from the user side. On browser performance, the message was basically that there is no final state where the work is done. Because JavaScript Core and WebKit are deeply integrated into the operating system, Safari can sometimes outperform native apps, especially on lower-power devices. But the team wasn't presenting that as some victory lap. They talked about performance as a constant process shaped by new benchmarks, by transitions like WebGPU replacing WebGL, and by per-commit testing that catches regressions early. That endless tuning may not be glamorous, but it's the kind of work that makes the whole platform feel fast instead of just one demo on one machine. There was also a straightforward defense of the standards process being slow, even when that slowness drives developers a little crazy. The example of features taking years, like grid lanes, was used to make the case that careful review helps avoid regressions and produces APIs that are sturdier in the long run. The argument is basically that moving slower can better protect users, compatibility, and privacy, even if it means waiting longer for the thing everybody wants right now. That probably won't make anyone love the delay, but it does explain the trade-off in a way that feels pretty honest. One more interesting piece from the spatial side. In VisionOS immersive environments, the web page itself stays active instead of disappearing behind a fully separate experience. Users can press the crown to return to a shared view, and they can also use on-page controls to manage the immersive scene. That means the web content can pause, resume, or reposition the immersive experience without kicking the user out of the web context. It's a subtle design choice, but an important one, because it preserves continuity instead of making immersive mode feel like a handoff to some totally different world. So the broad picture here is a web platform that's getting more capable, more native, and in some places more imaginative, while still insisting that the basics matter. If you know the standards well, a lot of these changes look less like disruption and more like the platform finally catching up with how people actually want to build. And for once, the future of the web includes both semantic HTML and 3D models, which feels oddly wholesome. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.